poor village girl forced into marriage, had no clue her husband was a billionaire CEO. They called it a marriage, but there were no vows. No kiss. Just a signature and silence. She married him to save her father. He left the next morning without even looking back. For 3 years she scrubbed floors and hid her name. Until one morning, the CEO returned and called her by her job title, not her name. Not his wife. But fate doesn't forget. And neither do the women who loved, even when no one was watching. The wedding nobody wanted. Claire Johnston didn't cry at her wedding. Not when the clerk mispronounced her name. Not when her father's hands trembled as he tried to adjust her veil made of lace older than her. Not even when her husband, Gerald Shea, glanced at the clock during the ceremony more often than he looked at her. She just smiled, quietly, politely, like her mama had taught her. It wasn't love. It wasn't even kindness. It was survival. "You understand what you're signing?" the woman behind the desk had asked, eyeing Claire's worn denim jacket and mud-stained sneakers. Claire nodded. "It's just paperwork. No rings, no photos, just a signature on the dotted line, and one tiny hope that her father might live long enough to walk again." Gerald didn't speak a single word to her until they stepped outside the courthouse. Then he handed her a platinum card. "No password," he said. "Use it if you need anything. I'm leaving for a business trip tonight." She blinked. "Tonight?" He looked at her like he was already gone. "This isn't real for me," he said flatly. "But my grandfather wanted it. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Claire wanted to laugh, or cry, but all she did was nod. She married a stranger to keep her father alive. And that stranger left before the sun set. 3 years later, Austin, Texas. The city hadn't changed Claire, it had only polished her silence. She worked nights as a janitor at Shaytech, the kind of glass and steel company where women in pencil skirts clicked down the halls and men in suits never saw her at all. She liked it that way. No one knew she was married, not even her best friend, Tyler, a security guard who'd helped her get the job. It wasn't a real marriage anyway. Gerald Shea had vanished into the upper layers of the world. Headlines, yachts, boardrooms. And Claire? She stayed low, scrubbing floors, paying bills, sending every spare dollar back home. Then, on a Tuesday, everything changed. She was pushing a mop down the executive wing when she heard it. The sound of polished leather shoes and sharp voices. "Mr. Shea's arriving today. Clear the way." Claire froze. Her heart stuttered, then pounded. Not because she missed him, but because she didn't know if he even remembered her face. She ducked her head as he passed. 3 years. Not a call, not a letter, not a single question about her or her father. And now he was back, the same tailored suit, the same unreadable eyes. He walked by without noticing her. Of course he did. To him, she was just a cleaner now. That night, she opened the drawer where she kept his card. She hadn't used it, not once. Not for food, not for rent. Not even when her father's surgery cost more than she could make in 6 months. She earned every penny scrubbing floors. She didn't want his money. She had only wanted to matter. The next morning, a new order came down. A cleaning staff are to report to the executive floor. Mr. Shea has requested personal assistance. Claire's name was on the list. When she stepped into his office, he looked up and didn't flinch. Didn't blink. "Your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Claire Johnston?" Something flickered in his eyes. A pause. But then it was gone. "You'll clean this office every morning, precisely 6 a.m., no delays." She nodded. "Yes, sir." He didn't remember her. He remembered her name, but not her. Not the woman he married. Not the girl who gave up everything to save her father, and, unknowingly, saved him too. Claire walked out of the office with her shoulders straight. She wasn't the same girl who signed those marriage papers in Tennessee. This time, she wouldn't wait for him to see her. But this time, He'd have to earn it. Chapter 1. A Marriage Signed in Silence. The rain started halfway through the drive to the courthouse, soft at first, then heavy like it knew what kind of day this was. Claire kept her hand on her father's. His knuckles were sharp now, all bone and ache, but he gripped her back with everything he had. "You don't have to do this, Claire," he whispered, voice like gravel. "I want to," she said. That was a lie, and she wanted 1,000 other things. But life had a way of turning dreams into debts, and hers had already been paid for in full by her father's illness, by the lost scholarships, and now by a name on a marriage certificate. Gerald Shea arrived 5 minutes late. Black suit, no umbrella, eyes like polished ice. He didn't apologize, didn't smile. He walked past the clerk, past Claire, straight to the waiting room and said, "Let's do this." Claire followed silently. The ceremony lasted 8 minutes. The clerk asked them both to sign. Gerald's signature was clean, practiced. Hers trembled, just slightly. "Any vows?" the woman asked. "No," Gerald replied. Claire hesitated. "Can I say something?" Gerald raised an eyebrow, as if surprised she had a voice. Claire turned to her father first. "Dad, this isn't how you imagined it. But I want you to know I'm not doing this out of duty. I'm doing it out of love. For you." Then she looked at Gerald. "I don't know what kind of man you are, and you don't know me, but I'll keep my word. That's all I have to offer." Gerald didn't respond. He nodded once, and that was that. Outside, the rain had eased into a drizzle. Gerald handed her a small envelope. "This has your name on the joint account. Use it for what you need." She opened it. A platinum card, embossed. No name, no instructions. "Why are you having this reaction?" I asked. He glanced at his phone. "My flight's in 2 hours." Asked. "I have a company to run. I didn't marry you for romance. My grandfather is dying. He wanted to see me married. I gave him that." Claire felt her throat close. "I know. Don't have to pretend this is anything more than a transaction." "I'm not pretending anything." His eyes flicked over her, not cruel, just indifferent. "You can stay in the apartment we arranged in Austin. Monthly allowance will be deposited. I won't contact you unless it's necessary." Then he turned to leave. But just before stepping into the black car waiting for him, he paused. "Claire," he said. She looked up. "Don't fall in love with me." She smiled, rain in her lashes. "I won't." Austin, 3 years later. The apartment wasn't big, but it was clean. She kept it that way. Claire never used the card. She refused the stipend after the first deposit and got a night job at Shaytech, his company, without revealing her identity. It was easier this way. Simpler. At first she told herself she was hiding. Later she realized she was waiting for him to return, to ask about her, to remember her. But now 3 years had passed, and not a single word. She kept her wedding ring in a box, not because it meant something, but because it meant everything she hadn't been given. One night, as she was mopping the west corridor, a voice came through the hall. "Prepare Mr. Shea's suite. He's flying in tonight." Claire stopped moving. "Mr. Shea." "Gerald." She wasn't ready. The next morning, she saw him. He stepped out of the elevator taller than she remembered, sharper, still cold. Their eyes met for half a second. Then, nothing. He walked past her like she was air. Claire kept cleaning. Her knuckles were white around the mop. He didn't remember her. Or worse, he did, and chose not to show it. Either way, it stung. Later that day, she was called to the executive suite. "You've been assigned to clean Mr. Shea's private office," said the HR assistant. "Daily. He specifically requested a night shift cleaner to avoid disruptions." Claire nodded. "Understood." She entered his office at 5:55 a.m. the next day. He was already there. "You're early," he said, not looking up from his laptop. She stood still. Sorry. Don't be. He finally looked at her. Name Claire Johnston. The pen in his hand twitched. Johnston? He echoed, slowly. He said nothing else. Didn't ask, didn't recognize. Maybe the years had changed her. Maybe he never really saw her to begin with. That night, Claire lay awake staring at the ceiling. The man she'd married didn't remember her, and the woman she'd become no longer needed him to. But something inside her, something deep, whispered this wasn't the end. 'Cause love, even when forgotten, has a way of remembering. Chapter 2: The CEO's Return. Gerald Shea didn't like Texas. It was too loud, too hot, too real. But Shea Tech's Austin expansion was his grandfather's dream, and Gerald was a man who kept promises, even when the man who made them was no longer alive to witness their fulfillment. His private elevator opened to the penthouse office. He stepped out, nodded at no one, and moved through the hallway with "Welcome back, Mr. Shea," someone whispered. He didn't respond. At Shea Tech, no one knew he had a wife. And he liked it that way. The first glitch. It happened on his third morning back. The scent of lavender hit him first, faint but familiar. His brow twitched. He was seated at his desk when the cleaning crew entered. Or rather, she entered. "Your office, sir," the supervisor said. He didn't look up. "Just don't touch the files on the right." "Well," a soft voice replied. He froze. There was something about that voice. He looked up. The woman was bent over his bookshelf, collecting discarded mugs and dusting under the glass model of the Shea Tech Tower. She looked plain, brown ponytail, simple clothes, slender wrists. But her voice, her name. "Your name?" he asked, startling her. She turned. Claire Johnston." Time paused. Gerald leaned back in his chair, the name echoing in his head like an old piano key pressed for the first time in years. Johnston. That name meant something. He blinked hard. "Johnston," he said. She nodded slowly, not flinching. He stared at her. "You're new?" "We've been here 2 years," she said, voice even. 2 years. Same company, same building. And he'd never noticed her. Till now. He dismissed her with a nod, but she saw the way his hands curled into fists. She didn't know if he recognized her. She just knew. Something inside him had shifted. Meanwhile, in HR. "Claire Johnston," murmured Philippa, the floor manager, tapping his screen. "Assigned to executive office cleaning by Mr. Shea himself." A staffer looked up. Did he know her before? Felipe frowned. "No clue, but she's never made trouble. Hard worker." "Pretty too," someone muttered. Philippe narrowed his eyes. That doesn't matter. But it did. Especially to people like Trina Holder, Shea Tech's regional manager, and Gerald's rumored ex. That night. Claire returned to her apartment, peeled off her uniform, and sank into the silence. She stared at the credit card she still hadn't used, the one with no name, the one he gave her the day he left. Gerald was back. He saw her. Spoke to her. But didn't remember their wedding day, her father's tears, the way the rain soaked her back as he got in that black car and disappeared. And she tried not to care. But in her chest, something fragile cracked. Gerald's mind wouldn't rest. All week, her name echoed. Claire Johnston. He pulled up the company roster, checked her personnel file. Birth date, address, education incomplete. Emergency contact, a father in rural Tennessee. It added up. But still, no photo, no confirmation. He called his assistant. "Get me a list of employees who joined between 3 and 2 years ago. Janitorial." "Any reason?" "I'm trying to remember something." The second glitch. On Friday, he spilled his coffee. A rare moment of clumsiness. Claire rushed in, mop already in hand. "Sorry," he muttered, standing. "I've got it," she said, kneeling. As she cleaned, her ring glinted under the fluorescent light. Not on her ring finger. On a chain around her neck. Gerald noticed. His jaw clenched. He said nothing, but when she left the room, he stared at the door long after it shut. Trina's jealousy awakens. "She's just a cleaner," Trina said coldly, watching Claire from across the office. "But I've seen the way he looks at her." Filippo warned her, "Don't start something you can't control." And Trina smiled. "Control is my specialty." Late that night, Gerald stood alone in his office, city lights sprawling beneath him. He reached into the drawer and pulled out the marriage certificate still folded in the corner of an old folder, marked Personal. Claire Johnston. He hadn't spoken that name in 3 years. But now, it lived in his mouth. He didn't know if this cleaner was the same Claire. But something told him he'd already broken her once. And if he was right, if this woman was his wife, he had a lot more than a name to remember. The woman who didn't take his money. Gerald Shea wasn't used to curiosity. He was a man of structure, of spreadsheets, of certainty. But that night, something cracked through the steel of his certainty, like light bleeding through frost, and her name was written in it. Claire Johnston. The private inquiry. Gerald stood over Felipe's desk just after dawn. "Does she still receive the monthly allowance?" he asked, voice low. Filippo blinked. "Sir?" "Claire Johnston. Janitorial staff." Felipe typed quickly. "Technically, yes. The account was never closed." Gerald's voice hardened. "And the balance?" "Untouched, sir. Not a single withdrawal since the first deposit 3 years ago." Gerald froze. "Activity?" he repeated. "No, sir. In fact, she rejected the card, mailed it back the second month." Filippo showed him the record, a formal refusal letter signed in blue ink. Gerald read the signature twice. Claire Johnston. His heart kicked once, hard. Memories return like ghosts. The courthouse. Her rain-soaked hair. The way she said, "I'll keep my word. That's all I have." She hadn't lied. She married him, stayed silent, and never took a thing. She didn't chase him. She didn't need him. And now she worked the graveyard shift in his building, cleaning the floors while he sat in a penthouse she had just mopped. "Ghost town, Claire." Claire stood outside her father's clinic. He was still recovering from surgery, the one Gerald paid for, unknowingly. And she never told him where the money came from. Because it was never about money. Her father looked up from his porch chair, eyes kind. "How's the night shift?" She smiled. "Same as always. Quiet, predictable." "Still married to that ghost?" Claire laughed softly. "He's more of a shadow now. He walks through the halls but never stops to look." "Does it hurt?" "We've been through so much," she said, honestly, "but less than it used to." The first real conversation. Later that week, Claire returned to his office to clean after. Gerald was still there, typing in silence. She paused by the door. "I can come back later." His voice was quieter than usual, more human. She bent to clean the glass table. "I looked into something," he said suddenly. "Your file, the account I opened for you." Claire froze. He stood slowly, walked toward her. "You never used a cent." She straightened but didn't meet his eyes. "No." She hesitated. Then, "Because I married you for my father, not for money, and because you said not to fall in love with you, so I made sure I wouldn't owe you anything." The room went still. Gerald's throat worked. "I never expected that." She finally looked at him, eyes quiet, unafraid. "A problem. You expected nothing, and still, I gave you everything." He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away. But this time, he didn't slam the door. Small shift. The next morning, Gerald had a request sent to HR. Ashburn transfer Claire Johnston to executive floor team permanently. And under reason for transfer, he wrote 2 words: competence, trust. It was the first thing he'd written about her that felt like truth. Chapter 4. The violin she never played again. Gerald didn't mean to notice her. Not at first. But after that night, the one where she said, "You expected nothing, and still I gave you everything," he found himself paying attention in ways he never had before. To how she moved. To how she spoke. To how sadness clung to her the way dust clings to glass, seen only when the light hits it just right. A forgotten talent. The elevator opened one evening as he left a boardroom. Music floated down the hallway. He followed it, drawn not by curiosity but by something deeper. Something ancient. The sound led him to a staff lounge, mostly unused. Through the half-open door, he saw her. Claire, alone, sitting on a weathered bench, holding a violin. She didn't play, not really. Just held the bow and brushed it gently against the strings, like muscle memory trying to wake itself. He didn't step inside. He just watched. And for a moment, she wasn't a cleaner. Or his almost wife. She was. Something whole. The past comes back. Later that night, he pulled up her old background forms again. Buried beneath layers of HR bureaucracy, he found it. Claire Johnston. Adopted to the National Youth Symphony program at 17. Qualified for personal misconduct. We stared at that word for a long time. Misconduct. It felt wrong. He called Felipe. "Can you pull up local press archives from 6 years ago? Classical music competitions. Anything with Claire Johnston." 30 minutes later, he had what he needed. A blurry photo, a headline, "Smiling violinist disqualified amidst scandal." Libel rumors, cloud judge's reputation. Claire Johnston disappears from competition scene. No charges, no proof, just rumor. His jaw tightened. Someone had destroyed her. Confrontation in the hall. The next morning, Gerald caught her in the hallway. "Do you still play?" he asked. She blinked, taken aback. "What?" "Then violin." Her breath hitched. "Not anymore." But she hesitated. "Because when I played, I felt seen, and that made me a target." And his voice softened. "You were disqualified." "I was framed," she said, lifting her chin. "But no one believed me. Not the school, not the media, not even the sponsors." "Do you want to be believed now?" She looked at him, and for a second he thought she might cry. But she just said, "No, I just want to be forgotten." He didn't reply, because he already knew. He'd never forget her. Going, "Well, Trina Plotz." Across the office, Trina Holder watched Gerald speak to Claire, watched the softness in his eyes that had never been for her. But she clenched her jaw. "And she's from the countryside," she hissed to her assistant. "A disgrace." Still, the assistant murmured, "Claire knows how to win people." "She knows how to seduce people," Trina snapped, "and I'm going to make sure she regrets ever stepping foot in this company." The gift he didn't expect. 2 days later, a box was delivered to Gerald's office. No card, no note. Inside, a violin string, worn, frayed, but clean. And underneath it, a folded music sheet.
His name was written across the top in high handwriting. To the man who listened, he didn't smile, but he didn't stop thinking about her the rest of the night.
Chapter 5. The night they slept in the same room. Gerald never liked corporate retreats. Too many smiles, too much noise, too much pretending. But this one, he had planned it himself. Because he needed her away from the city. Away from the rumors. Away from Trina. And maybe, though he wouldn't admit it, closer to him. The villa. Claire didn't know what to expect when the company bus dropped them off at Moonview Resort. She certainly didn't expect a private villa set apart from the others, or a handwritten card tucked beneath her room key. Villa 3. Privacy guaranteed. She frowned, but said nothing. Ing falls. She was brushing her hair when the knock came. Gerald stood at the door. No suit, just slacks and a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled. "You're in my villa," he said simply. She blinked. "There's only one bed." "I'll sleep on the couch." She crossed her arms. "You planned this?" He didn't deny it. "You didn't answer your messages," he said quietly. "I had to get your attention somehow." Claire exhaled. "You got it." She walked past him, left the door open. "Make yourself uncomfortable." Late night, soft words. They didn't speak for hours. She curled up on the bed with a book. He answered emails from the corner chair. The silence wasn't cold, it was fragile. Like if either of them said the wrong thing, the whole moment would shatter. "Will you regret marrying me?" she asked softly, around midnight. He looked up. When he said, "Because I didn't understand what I had, and I left it behind before I ever saw it clearly." Claire looked down at her hands. "Didn't I know?" He stood. I walked slowly to her side. "Nor do I regret not remembering your face the moment I saw it again." There was a moment, a breath, when he reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. The space between them was smaller than it had ever been. She could smell the rain in his hair, hear the echo of everything he never said. But instead of kissing her, Gerald whispered, "I'll sleep on the couch." She nodded. But neither of them really slept. Morning after, Claire awoke to the sound of soft knocks. Gerald stood by the open kitchen, making breakfast. She blinked. "You cook?" He shrugged. "I Google." Pause. "I didn't want you to leave hungry." She stared at him for a long moment, unsure of who this man was. This man who left her for 3 years, yet remembered she took her coffee with honey. Gerald poured 2 cups. And for the first time in their strange, broken marriage, they had breakfast together. Chapter 6. The ring they said she stole. The resort's second day was supposed to be lighthearted. A team bonding event. Laughter, games, sunshine. But for Claire Johnston, it became a battlefield. And her wedding ring, the one she hid on a chain behind her collar, was the match that set it all on fire. Claire had only stepped away for a moment. She returned to find a crowd gathering in the common hall, whispers thick in the air. Trina Holder stood at the center, holding something high like a trophy. "A ring. A ring." "Miss," Trina said, "is Gerald Shea's custom engagement ring. It's worth over 100 million, and this cleaner claimed it belongs to her." Gasps. Claire froze. "I didn't claim anything." Trina smiled like a snake. "Oh, then why were you wearing it?" Claire touched the empty space beneath her collar. Her chain had broken. The ring must have fallen. And someone, Trina, had found it? The accusation. "You've always pretended to be simple, kind," Trina spat, circling her. "But now everyone can see what you are. A liar, a gold digger, a thief." Claire's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "The ring is mine." "Then tell us who gave it to you," Trina shouted. Silent. Because she couldn't say it. Not like this. Not with the marriage still hidden. The moment he walked in, "I did." The crowd turned. Gerald Shea stood at the doorway, calm as a storm. "I gave her that ring," he said, "because she's my wife." Silence. A heartbeat of disbelief. Then the entire room gasped. Claire looked at him, wide-eyed. And Gerald, her husband, her mystery, her heartache, walked straight to her. "She didn't steal anything," he said. "That ring was custom designed for the woman I married 3 years ago. The woman I forgot, the woman I love." Truth, finally spoken. "Just your wife," someone whispered. "Melissa," Gerald said. "My wife, my only one." Trina's face drained of color. "You lied to me," she hissed. I never promised you anything, he said coldly. You just assumed it. She tried to speak, but Gerald turned away. This is the woman who saved my grandfather, the one who kept my secret, the one who never asked me for anything. He looked back at Claire. Well, now it's my turn to stop hiding. Claire's choice. Everyone waited for Claire to speak, to react, to cry. But she didn't. She looked at the ring, then at Gerald, then simply said, "Next time, don't let someone else protect your promises." And she walked away, leaving him holding the ring that once meant everything, and now meant nothing without her trust. Chapter 7. The child she thought was his. Claire pressed her palm against her stomach, half from instinct, half from disbelief. The test sat face up on the edge of the sink, quiet and damning. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. The word rattled in her head like thunder in a valley. Pregnant. The silence in the room was thick. Not even the faucet dared drip. Claire's breath caught in her throat. A single tear tracked down her cheek. Not from sadness, not yet, but from the realization that nothing would be the same. Again. She picked up the test and tucked it into her purse like a secret. Because for now, that's what it had to be. The retreat was over, but its aftermath wasn't. Claire moved quietly through the office hallways, head down, shoulders taut, as if her body already knew it was carrying something heavier than just a secret. She hadn't seen Gerald since the morning they'd shared breakfast. The morning he'd cooked for her, like a man trying to remember what love looked like. But the space between them had returned. Not cruel, not cold. Just distant. Like a fog that refused to lift. She thought about the night they shared that room. He'd stood so close she could count his eyelashes. She remembered the way he looked at her, like she wasn't just his obligation, but something fragile, something real. But now, she didn't know, and the fear that he didn't remember, or worse, that it hadn't meant anything to him, made her stomach knot in more ways than one. A voice behind her pulled her back to reality. "Miss Johnston." She turned. It was Filippo, Gerald's assistant. Always polite, always controlled. "Mr. Shea would like to see you in his office." Her heart stuttered. She nodded, followed him through the corridors, tried not to hear the whispers that had begun again. They never stopped entirely, not for a cleaner from the countryside who now wore a manager's badge. She stepped into Gerald's office, and for a second everything froze. He looked tired. There was a paper in his hand, an earring. She knew it immediately. It was the one she'd seen before, the one that had disappeared the morning after the retreat. You know whose this is?" he asked, without looking up. Claire shook her head slowly. He set it down. "Someone left it in my room that night." Her lungs turned to ice. "That night, the night they'd—" "I found out who it belongs to," he added. She came forward. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "She did?" He nodded. "Lynn, one of the receptionists?" The air left her lungs. "Oh, she said she came into my room after I passed out. That nothing happened, but the earring was left behind." Claire nodded slowly. Every cell in her body felt like it was spinning. Then, maybe, the baby wasn't his. Or was it? She hadn't been with anyone else. Not in the last year, not even close. But if he truly believed it was Lynn in his bed that night, he wouldn't believe the child was his either. "I see," she said, turning to go. "Claire." She stopped. "Is something wrong?" Her fingers gripped the edges of her coat. Then, without a word, she turned, walked back to his desk, and pulled something from her purse. "The test." She set it down, let it speak for her. Gerald stared at it for a full 5 seconds, then looked at her. His voice caught. "You're pregnant." She nodded. "It's mine." "I thought so," she said, her voice breaking. "But now I don't know. You said it was Lynn that night." "I don't remember her being there. I don't remember anything after dinner. But—" She stepped back. "You don't have to say it. I get it." "No, you don't," he said, standing. "Claire, I never wanted to be apart from you. I just didn't know how to stay." She looked at him, tears brimming. "You always leave, even now, when I need you most." Took a step toward her. "Claire?" She turned and walked out. The whispers doubled by noon. Someone had seen her in tears. Someone had seen her drop the test in the trash. By 2 o'clock, Trina was at her desk, smiling sweetly, asking if she'd been feeling well lately. Claire said nothing, packed her things, walked out without saying goodbye. She left behind her badge, her title, her chair. And the man who never once said, "Stay." That night, Gerald found the note on his desk. "I can't raise a child where I'm not wanted." Nothing else. No signature. But he knew. He picked up the test, held it in both hands like it was a flame. But then called Philippa. "Find her?" "Sir." "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what it costs. Find Claire. Bring her home." Filippo paused. "And the baby?" Gerald's voice cracked. "My child. My wife. I won't lose them again." Chapter 8. The competition that changed everything. Claire didn't think she'd ever play music again. Not after what had happened all those years ago. The disqualification, the shame, the whispers. But this wasn't about her anymore. This was about defending the company that had given her a second chance, the people who believed in her. Even if Gerald still couldn't say it out loud, when she stepped onto the stage, violin in hand, everything fell silent. Trina stood on the opposite end, arms crossed, smug with confidence. She had the international band behind her, a flashy group dressed in designer black. The crowd leaned toward her with expectation. But Claire stood alone, no backup, just her, a girl from the countryside, a cleaner turned manager turned mistake. She heard the quiet gasp from somewhere in the crowd. Someone had recognized her, the once disgraced prodigy. The announcer stepped forward. "This will be the deciding performance. The winner will gain full rights to the Great Bay Project. Contestants, begin." Trina nodded to her band. The beat dropped, a fusion of digital and symphonic. Modern, loud, crowd-pleasing, her fingers moved with elegance, technical precision, a dance choreographed for applause. Claire waited, then lifted her bow. The first note she played wasn't loud. It wasn't even particularly sharp, but it was pure. Like wind through old pine, like a memory long buried. The hall went still. Her fingers moved like breath, the music telling a story no one had asked for, but everyone needed to hear. The melody spoke of loneliness, of rain falling on old porches, of a girl kneeling on gravel picking up broken pieces of her dreams, and playing anyway. Gerald stood in the back, silent. He didn't know she could play like that. He didn't know anyone could. The final note hung in the air like the softest goodbye. Silence. And in thunderous applause. Claire bowed once, then stepped off the stage. Her hands trembled. Trina stared at her, wide-eyed. She looked ready to scream, or cry. Maybe both. The judges took only a minute to deliberate. Winner, Clara Johnston. Shea Group retains ownership of Great Bay. The room erupted. Gerald pushed through the crowd, found her standing alone near the hallway. "You saved the entire company," he whispered. Claire smiled faintly. "Didn't mean to. I just didn't want to lose again." "You didn't. Not this time." He looked at her then, really looked, at the girl he married in silence, at the woman who kept staying, even when it cost her everything. He opened his mouth to speak, but Trina burst in, holding her wrist. "She injured me. She's the reason I lost. I demand justice." "Stop," Gerald said, stepping forward. "We have footage." And Trina went pale. "You wouldn't." "I already did." Filippo stepped in with a folder. "Security footage. You faked your fall, you staged everything." The room gasped. "Trina Holder," Gerald said, "you are dismissed from Shea Group, effective immediately, and all collaboration with Holder Enterprises is terminated." "Now, you can't do this, Gerald, please. I did it all for you. You did it all for power, he said coldly. "And Claire never asked for any of this, but she gave us everything." As Trina was escorted out, Claire looked down, shaken. "I don't want a title," she said softly, "or revenge. I just want peace." "You'll have it," Gerald said, "and more, if you'll let me." She met his eyes. And the war wasn't over. But for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. Chapter 9. The Ring That Exposed the Lie. Claire hadn't worn the ring since the retreat, not because she didn't want to, but because it felt too heavy, too visible, too close to a truth that no one was ready to name. But now, it sat quietly in the velvet box inside her drawer, and it was about to change everything. The company was alive with whispers again, this time not about music or promotion, but about a pregnancy rumor that wouldn't die. Claire walked with her head down, brushing past coworkers, past glances that lingered a second too long. Then came the meeting. All department heads, a full floor assembly. Gerald walked in with his usual cool silence, but his eyes searched the crowd for only one person: Claire. She sat near the back, arms folded tight. The pregnancy test wasn't in her purse anymore. It was in his drawer now. The drawer she'd left it in when she walked out of his office 2 days ago. Gerald cleared his throat. "I want to take a moment before we begin," he said, "to thank the woman who saved our company's most critical deal, Miss Claire Johnston." Applause. But she didn't stand. She didn't smile. He continued, "And I also want to make something clear. 3 years ago, I got married." Silence fell like a stone. "Many of you didn't know. We kept it quiet, too quiet, out of fear, out of timing. But today, I'm done hiding." Gasps fluttered around the room. Gerald turned to the side, opened a small velvet box, and held up the ring. "Claire Johnston is my wife." Claire's breath hitched. Her heart tried to keep up. Someone stood in outrage. "Trina. That ring, Claire stole it. She's been wearing it, pretending it's hers." Gasps again. Claire remained seated, silent. Gerald's voice hardened. "That ring was custom-made, only one in the world. I designed it myself. Claire never stole it. I gave it to her. Because she's the only woman who's ever had my heart." Tina's voice broke. You said you loved me." "I never said that," Gerald replied flatly. "Not once." Felipe stepped forward with documents. "Also, we've confirmed that Miss Holder falsified internal contracts. She's under investigation." Security came. Trina screamed, "You'll regret this, Gerald. I did everything for you." He turned away. "No, you did it for yourself." As Trina was escorted out, Claire stood up slowly, trembling. Gerald walked to her, held out the ring. "I want the world to know you're mine." She stared at it. "I'm not ready," she whispered. He nodded. "Then I'll wait, but I'll never stop choosing you." She took the ring, not for the promise, but because, for the first time, it felt real. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to be seen, even if it meant being vulnerable, even if it meant risking her heart all over again. Chapter 10. She walked away with his heart. The sun hadn't even risen when Claire stood in front of the train station, a single suitcase beside her. Her hair was tied back, face bare, no makeup, no jewelry, not even the wedding ring. Just the truth in her eyes, and the weight of too many goodbyes. She had already left the letter on Gerald's desk. It was simple. "Thank you for loving me, but I need to learn how to love myself before I can believe I deserve it. Maybe one day, when the dust has settled, we'll meet again, not as broken pieces, but as whole people." She didn't expect him to come, but he did. Not in a limo, not with a speech, just him, in a hoodie and jeans, out of breath and furious with grief. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye?" She looked down. "I said everything in the letter." It wasn't enough. "Gerald," she said softly, "you're a CEO. You're rebuilding your company, your reputation. You don't need a woman who still flinches every time someone raises their voice." I don't need perfect, he said. I need real, and you're the most real thing that's ever happened to me. Silence stretched. Then she whispered, what if I fail again? And then we fail together. She closed her eyes. Tears welled but didn't fall. I'm scared. So am I, he said, but being with you scares me less than a life without you. And she took a step forward. And he did something he hadn't done in years. He cried. Right there, in public, in front of strangers, in front of her. Because the woman he thought he'd lose was still choosing him, despite it all. Claire dropped her suitcase and ran to him. He caught her. Not like a hero catching a damsel, but like a man holding his own heart. They stood like that for minutes, maybe hours. Time no longer mattered. The next morning, the company buzzed. Gerald walked into the boardroom, hand in hand with Claire. No one said a word. They didn't have to. He cleared his throat. From now on, there will be no shame in honesty, no punishment for love, and no more pretending. He turned to her. Claire Johnston, my wife, the strongest woman I know. Applause erupted. She squeezed his hand. In the front row, Filippo grinned like a proud brother. Even the older executives clapped, slowly at first, then faster. Change was coming. Not because Gerald made a bold business move, but because he made the most terrifying one. He chose to be human. Weeks passed. Claire didn't move into a penthouse. She kept her tiny apartment with plants in the window and a chipped mug that said, "Try again tomorrow." But Gerald came over every night. Sometimes with takeout, sometimes with silence. But always with his heart in his hands. She hung her violin on the wall. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder, even the most broken instruments can sing again. The last scene was simple. Park bench, late autumn, her head on his shoulder. Leaves fall in, his hand resting on her belly. Not pregnant, not yet, but maybe one day. For now, it was enough to just breathe, to be seen, to be chosen, and to walk away from pain without bitterness. Because love had finally stopped running and started staying, where love finally stays. Sometimes love doesn't come like lightning. It comes like rain, soft, quiet, insistent. Claire was never meant to be the perfect wife, just as Gerald was never meant to be the flawless CEO. But what they became was something more lasting. Two people who found each other not when life was beautiful, but when it was unbearably hard. She taught him that love isn't something you earn through status. And he taught her that being seen, truly seen, doesn't make you weaker. It makes you whole. Their story wasn't built on grand gestures. It was built on late-night silences, soft forgiveness, a ring left in a drawer, a violin's final note. They didn't need the world's approval to prove their love. They just needed to stop hiding from it. And in the end, they learned that it's not love if it only thrives in secret. It's not love if it's built on fear. Love is public, brave, honest, and it shows up every day, even after you've broken, even after you've walked away. So if you're watching this, and you've loved someone so much it scared you, or left someone before they could leave you first, ask yourself, what if they were the one? What if you were enough all along? Tell us. Have you ever loved someone in silence? Have you ever been someone's secret when you wished to be there forever? Share your story below. You never know who's reading and who might finally feel seen because of your words. Because in a world of broken promises and forgotten vows, sincerity still has the power to heal. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes love worth waiting for.